And so as we begin to discuss the politics of selection, I would like to introduce Ndidi Dike and Perrin Lathrop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamal, for that really generous introduction.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you very much.
Ndidi and I are both thrilled to be here. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so we can get started with our conversation and share some images with you all. So, Ndidi, in your work, you often employ and picture everyday objects and materials, imploring viewers of your work to recognize the beauty of the everyday. In works like Trace, Transactional Aesthetics, which is the first work that we're going to discuss today, which you first made in 2015 for a biennial in Indonesia, and then represented at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris in 2019, you draw attention to the aesthetics of the market in Nigeria and also across the global South. The work urges us to see the market as tableau, really as a painting almost in front of us, with its strong sense of color, synergy, vitality, sights, sounds, smell, and prompts us to ask, where do these products that we're seeing, feasting on with our eyes, where do these products come from? So I guess the first question I'd like to ask is, just as the sort of source material for this work, the market in Lagos. What does visiting the market in Lagos really mean to you? And how might you describe a market, maybe Balogun market in Lagos?
I think Balogun market is a massive market in Lagos. It's very famous. If you look at the image, you can see the intensity of the products. You have intensity of human traffic, sounds, sights, and smells, like you said. And it's what I call chaotic disorder, or order in chaos. Because, when you first get to the market, you're so overwhelmed with so many products, so many people, so many things going on, transactions and movements, people along the streets with things on their head, on their back. So you're very much overwhelmed with that atmosphere. But when you really sit down and look at the wares that the women have put on display for sale, there's actually a methodology, and there's a conscious decision to mount those works in particular products, particular shapes and sizes. So for me, from an artist's perspective, that's what I found attractive. Like, even if you look at the image on the left, you can see the way the tomatoes are arranged. And to me, it's beautiful, it's attractive. So one of the things I find in the markets in Lagos is that architectonic structure and display of products that I find very interesting, very engaging. And I actually sort of like adopt some of those forms and ideas in my work when I come back to the studio.
And what are your interactions like with the women, you say, who run the stalls that you're visiting?
You've been to Lagos and everything is sort of like breakneck speed. It's always a quick transaction so that she can move on to the next person. So a lot of the things are really done very quickly. You've got to be attentive, you've got to be sharp, you've got to have your money ready so she can move on to the next customer. But generally, even when maybe you take a little time, like I remember going to the market with you and we were looking at natural medicines and natural herbs. They were quite patient and attentive to tell us what these various products did.
So it varies by individual.
Yeah.
But also you are, I imagine, taking these photographs yourself of the market and then collaging them together. But what is the reaction of the people who you encounter to you having a camera? Are you using a big camera or your phone? Or?
The issue of taking photographs in public spaces has always been very sensitive because of the military hangover from the military era. So what I normally do, I normally ask, because a lot of people don't like their photographs being taken. So what I do is, it's a question of negotiation. And in most cases, they're quite happy for me to take the images because I'm not actually taking them, I'm taking the products. So it's all about how you diplomatically ask and get the permission. That way you can get very good images, although at the same time, some shots are best when it's spontaneous, but you don't always have that liberty.
So
Yeah.
asking usually
Yes.
is the way
Yeah.
to go.
That's the way to go.
And I love how you've spoken about this kind of tension between order and chaos.
Yes.
And it almost kind of, there's like a temporality to your engagement with such chaos. You know, it takes a minute maybe for everything to come into focus.
Exactly.
You know, in its compositional sense.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's the way that you're kind of, you know, reproducing the compositions that are already, you know, created by these women who are running their stalls.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's incredible.
I think one of the also very interesting things about marketplaces is that I was part of the Jogja Biennale as well, and that's where this first iteration was done. And the interesting thing about the markets in Jogja is actually similar to the markets in Nigeria. And I can remember when I was researching on the history of Jogja for this particular work, I also, you know, I have an engagement with natural resource and extraction. So I also looked at their histories. They also had a military era. They also had a resource extraction, like on the left-hand side of the collage on the shelf, I put groundnuts, rubber, coffee, and palm oil that used to come from Nigeria. And then on the right-hand side, where you had the Jogja market, we had sugar, spices, nutmeg, and coffee. So, you know, there are a lot of similarities in our past histories, our past colonial era, and even to today. I mean, a lot of countries in the global south have a lot of interlocking similarities with regards to how their countries are run and various other things. This other one that you see now is the one I did in Palais de Tokyo. You can see under the shelf, I had the red sack bags because they are used for importing products from Nigeria, Cameroon, Ivory Coast. So I thought I would also bring that into the story as well. You know, the commodities of consumption, you know, globalization, trade, and so on and so forth.
How is audience reaction different in these different places? I think since you've recreated this work in two very different places, you know, Jogja in Indonesia and Paris.
I think it's very, you know, because it's so intense, it's overwhelming. And for a lot of people that have been to Lagos, they feel like they've come right back into that Lagos space. So they find it very attractive, you know, and they wonder, how could there be order in such a supposedly chaotic place? So different audiences, they all engage with it and they all find it very intriguing and interesting.
Jamal, also feel free to jump in with any thoughts that you have before we move on to the next.
Absolutely. Ndidi,
yes.
Two things. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because it's sometimes difficult to tell through the photograph, but the scale of the installation. And then also I've noticed that in each section, where it's been displayed in different places, that it's curved. And so could you talk a little bit about how you would hope for or how the viewer actually experienced the work?
The scale of this work is quite big. I mean, I think the length is something like maybe 15 meters in length, and then it's about 4 feet in height. So it's quite you know, the whole idea is for you to actually feel like you're really actually in the market. It's actually quite large. And then the issue of the shelf, I just felt it would be nice to have some of the products that are in the images so that you have this combination of the 3D and the 2D together. So you really also get a sense of how the physical objects and commodities are actually displayed in the market.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to just point out that
Yes.
for all of our visitors, to feel free to drop questions in the Q&A or the chat. And also I'd be remiss if I did not introduce Lakeisha Moore, who is also our gallery coordinator. So thank you.
Okay. In another more recent panoramic collage installation, Panoramic Meditation on Trade, Capitalism, and Dispossession, which was presented in your recent solo exhibition in Lagos later last year, called Working Through an Impasse. You again take the market as your subject.
Yes.
Which market did you visit to create this work?
Okay, this one is actually Lathrop market, which is a spare parts market where you go to buy different spare parts for all the various vehicles we have in Nigeria. And this large-scale black and white panoramic installation combines archival images and photographs taken by me in markets, as well as a few images, especially the early images of Lagos from the internet. The work uses the panoramic format to suggest the passage of time and a macro perspective on the centrality of marketplaces to African life worlds, both historically and in the present. Here, centrality cuts in multiple directions, speaking not only to the overwhelming dependence that many Africans have on markets for acquiring imported everyday necessities, but also the global dependence on Africa as a market, a site for both the pernicious extraction of natural resources that ultimately enrich the lives of societies in the global north, and a virtual dumping ground for expired or secondhand products. This work offers kind of like a subtle and optimistic metaphor for repair, re-engineering, putting things back together, whether in the current climate of pandemic or historically in the wake of the aftermath of the Biafran War, where the Igbos were given £20 to start life again after confiscation of their accounts by the Nigerian government. The Lathrop market is predominantly operated by Igbos who are professionals when it comes to different aspects. I mean, they could break down a car right from the very beginning to right to the very end. They're experts in oil pumps, changing engines. I mean, anything that requires the engineering of a car, they're very good at it. And many of them learn it from a very young age. We have what we call the apprentice system, where they are an apprentice to an older, more experienced trader for maybe 7 or 8 years. And then when they finish, the Oga or the boss gives them money to start their own business. And that communal effort of giving back and taking care and passing on, I think they call it Waboy, is very predominant in that market.
Interesting. I guess I also have another question related to your navigation of that space as an artist. You know, how often would you go to Lathrop market for your own, you know, just personal needs for your car versus, you know, the way that you're visiting the market to think about it visually, aesthetically, and what is the I mean, I imagine sometimes people...
I think I go there more for my art. I don't go there to repair my car. It's always a very exciting and overwhelming place. I mean, some of the forms, formats, and installation methods I get or I put into my work, like the totem poles you see there, many of those products are actually from the market. So I also look at how they display their wares and then come back and readapt it into my own interpretation. So markets generally are fodder for future works, future ideas, installations, paintings, you name it. I find the market space, like the one in Georgia, the one in Senegal, the one in Ghana, Nigeria, in the East, in Calabar, anywhere I go, markets, even in Brazil, anywhere I go, they have a market. I like to go there. It's a very important aspect of my work, and I find it very thrilling and interesting to look at how we work, how the interplay of structure, aesthetics, forms, and what have you come into play.
And just like you combined, you know, the panorama with three-dimensional objects in trace. You've also done that here. You mentioned your totem poles made out of different materials gathered from the market, but there are also fiberglass masks or sculptures, almost keeping watch over the scene. How did you create these masks? And then also, how do they relate exactly to the collage?
The market for me is, of course, a place for products, but also a place for human interaction. So for me, the fiberglass masks in assorted flesh tones stand on tall metal armatures and appear before the photographic panorama. So it's like you actually have the people or representations of the people in the market. And I include both the totems and masks as a way of thinking about the histories of the exchange and exploitation suggested by the market display, with current debates around or surrounding the looting and reparation of cultural artifacts from Africa, specifically the Benin bronzes. I mean, you talk about finances, you talk about production of the Benin bronzes, you talk about the history, restitution, all those topics for me are all still about markets, even if it's the financial market in Europe or the financial market in America. I mean, who benefits from showing those Benin bronzes in the museums abroad and things like that? So I just felt that it's important to bring that element into my work. And since it's a marketplace anyway, a different kind of marketplace, it's still, relevant when you're talking about the economies of various countries in the global north and so on and so forth.
Yeah, helping us to kind of see the way they are related in this marketplace sense.
And that's where, that's where they come from, isn't it? Yeah.
And I imagine you made molds out of actual masks.
Yeah, what happens?
Where were they from?
Yeah, you create them in clay and then cast them into POP. And then after you cast the POP, you, if I remember, after the POP, you now use the rubber. After the rubber, you now use the fiberglass. So it's quite a long process. But yes, they were created. You don't buy them, you create them with clay.
So you didn't like make a mold from an existing wooden sculpture per se?
No, I didn't. And that was done with Taiwo and me. They were the ones that assisted me in creating those masks. Yeah, it's not from an existing mask at all.
And this central one is kind of like an Ikenga, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Great. Should we move on, or?
I want to pause really quickly. We have a question from Philip Townsend. And his question is there any connection to Lagos' architectural landscape and the way the products are arranged in the market? And then the other question he has is that many of the people in the photograph are women. Can you speak to the role, if any, gender plays in transactional aesthetics?
In answer to the first question, there's no relationship to the landscape, right?
To the architecture of Lagos? I mean,
no, definitely to the architecture. I mean, for me, the way the products are displayed in my mind, has an architectonic structure. So definitely that is part of it. For my interpretation, I'm sure that the people creating the installations or displaying their wares are not necessarily conscious of that. But for me, that's my interpretation. And then the women always play a very dominant role in the markets, especially in the food markets. In the panel on the left, I think there are more women there because that was Lagos markets in the early, let's say pre-independence. But the major images of panoramic meditation are from the male market, which is run by men mostly. And generally, I like to talk about women issues in my work. I'm a woman too, so I tend to gravitate towards the female and certain aspects of being an artist as a woman in my profession.
Great, thank you. Much of your work asks viewers, whether from Nigeria, from Europe, from the United States, to ask themselves how they're implicated in the continuing legacies of colonialism. In 2020, you produced A Bend in the River 2 for the Sanspeak Biennale in the Netherlands called Force Times Distance, which was directed by Bonaventure Ndidi. This work, in which you revisit an installation that you first created during a residency in Paris, investigates global entanglements of material dispossession and colonial and post-colonial exploitation. The installation maps the continued extraction of wealth from the global south, focusing on the expropriation of diamonds, rubber, and coltan and other materials from countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So first I'd like to ask, A Bend in the River, how did you arrive at this title?
Okay, like you mentioned, this work was featured in Sunspeak 2020 to 2024. And I thought I could share with you a little more background info on this particular work. This Bend in the River is the second iteration of the first one, like you mentioned, which was part of my solo exhibit in Paris in 2017, titled In the Guise of Resource Control. My work was actually titled by Sumesh Sharma, a curator in Paris at the time of my Pernod Ricard Fellowship in Paris at Villa Vassiliev in 2017. He saw the correlation between my work and the author's book. The work takes its title from a novel by V.S. Naipaul, A Bend in the River, an Indian merchant living in a small town in newly independent East Africa country, observes from an outsider's point of view the rapid changes caused in particular by the law of ivory and gold resources and the corruption that is gradually blighting his environment. It's in this same foreign gaze that Virginie Bobbin regarded as an installation that is surrounded by mixed objects brought back from Nigeria with local materials themselves, metaphorically charged.
Okay, so from a novel by V.S. Naipaul.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. In this work and others, you manipulate materials and reproduce forms with socio-political and historical resonance. In this work, why did you choose hands?
For quite a while, I've been engaging with the past historical narratives of the Congo, the extraction of latex rubber during King Leopold's time, when during the Berlin Conference in 1885, Africa was was cut up into various colonies. And it's ironic that he never came to the Congo, but he was the one that was in charge of all the resources. So this installation consists of a suite of broken, amputated hands and fingers cast in plaster of Paris. These elements are situated in cardboard boxes of the sort used for medical gloves. The boxes of sculptural elements are arrayed on the gallery floor, whether in neat rows or extended paths around the perimeter of the space, with sand poured on the floor. In both instances, the arrangement is intended to evoke at once production lines, organized labor, and the industrial undercurrents of minimalist floor-bound sculptures of the 1960s. Some of the sculptural hands and fingers are tipped with shimmering glitter that alludes to the optical effects of exploited diamonds, coltan, and other precious minerals taken from our continent. Meanwhile, the truncated form of the body part carries reference to notorious histories of bodily deformation and amputation that I just mentioned, known to result from forced labor and quota systems, particularly in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where you have the coltan mines that they even have children as young as 4 working in those mines. And you have a lot of women that work there as well. So I was just sort of linking the past and the present, the continued exploitation of our resources, the continued exploitation of our youth, the continued exploitation of the land, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And this is what A Bend in the River is about.
Yeah.
Even the use of latex is a very interesting material, because you find that a lot of the migrants that are passing through, let's say, the Sahara Desert to Lampedusa, try and cross the Mediterranean into Lampedusa, the migration control officials, they actually wear latex gloves as well. And even when you go to museums, you see that they actually wear latex gloves or cotton gloves to handle these objects. So this is why I like to use different metaphors and different materials that are loaded with current debates, narratives, present and past histories.
Yeah, I mean, hands themselves are
Exactly.
so critical as a metaphor, really, for labor.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have, your reference to the forced labor practices under King Leopold II in the Congo Free State, and the horrific mutilation of individuals who failed to meet their quotas.
Yes.
But then also, I also then think of Picasso's Gertrude Stein portrait, for example, where her hand is really prominent in the front to kind of reference her strength, and it's often the a relationship to class and also to labor, and so all these really are art historical references as well in your use of the hand. It's really, really powerful. And I'm just so struck by the way that you really use tension often. In Trace we saw tension between order and chaos, and here we kind of see a tension between beauty and horror in the way that you're using material like glitter to reference the extraction of materials and wealth from places that have been subjected to such extraction for so long.
Exactly.
Jamal, did you want to add anything?
I did. I want to go back just to a practice question. First, I just want to make a comment about how, when you step back from it, how beautiful the work is. But yet, when you get close, you see, as you quoted, as the horror. And I'm very much interested in how you take, your ability to take a problematic, complicated histories, and then turn that to, from a distance, if we can go back to the first slide, and such a beautiful and powerful installation. And so I wonder, in thinking about your training as a painter before you began to teach yourself sculpture, do you feel that that training has influenced your work? Or your practice today?
No, I it's not from my training. I think it's more about this constant interaction and engagement with so many materials and processes. I feel that even when I'm talking about a very deep, dark subject, you can't really go to it, you can't really get into it immediately. You've got to find a way to lure people in. And that's where you have the tension between the beauty, and then when you actually find out what I'm talking about, you're actually a little bit horrified. So it's like that attraction and repulsion, which I've learned, along the way during my practice, during artist residencies, and we'll probably see that in the next work we're going to talk about as well. So it's just something I've learned, because some of these things are so hard to talk about. So how do you talk about them? You make them beautiful first, and then later on you actually begin to, by the time you come to look at the work and you engage with it, and then you hear the actual backstory behind it, and that's another feeling entirely. But yes, that's that manipulation of repulsion and attraction. I think it's quite dominant in my work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, a reminder to us all, we all have phones that have these materials, and the phones are beautiful, right? They can do beautiful things, and, you're making it a little bit more plain, that the kind of, tension between beauty and horror here, but, we carry it in our hands as well.
Exactly.
And so it's important for us to be reminded of that. Another work, Commodities of Consumption and Sites of Extraction in the Global South, which you made last year, is part of an ongoing research project related to the manufacture, circulation, and consumption of commodities and products related directly to the transatlantic slave trade, including gold, vanilla, indigo, and cotton. It delves into the geopolitical policies that underwrite extractive industries and control access to natural resources across the global South. really seeing materiality as metaphor, which is something that we get, throughout your work.
Yes.
When did you first begin thinking about the continuing legacies of the transatlantic slave trade in your practice?
I think the issue of the enslaved people, the transatlantic slave trade and migration is always a feature in various bodies of work. And this was started in 2019, I think, before the corona pandemic. I was part of Echoes of the South Atlantic. And I had decided that I would like to talk about commodities of consumption and size of extraction in the global South. And it's like a multifaceted and ongoing research project. For quite a while, I've been intensely engaging historical archives and working across a range of artistic media, including lens-based technologies, collage, installation, painting, and sculpture. I'd actually visited Brazil in Belo Horizonte in either 2018 or 2019 for an exhibition with Alphonse Hogg, and I had the opportunity to visit a disused gold mine in Brazil. So, as I'm going for various residencies, I'm going to various countries, I'm always photographing, researching, and picking up materials. So a lot of the images there are actually from the disused gold mine in Belo Horizonte. The foregoing modes of practice have guided investigations across time and with a global reach that dive into pre- and post-colonial histories of slavery, forced migration, displacement, decolonization, identity, gender inequality, and patriarchy. I've also been concerned with the political dimensions of commodities, their consumption, circulation, manufacture, and like you said, as well as the geopolitical policies that underwrite the control and extractive industries that govern natural sources and appropriation in Africa. I focused my attention on not only the Congo, but also countries like Madagascar. If you look at that image, the front of that image, you can see some very thin, like, I made them out of metal, but they're supposed to represent, yes, they represent vanilla pods. Madagascar is a country of the southeastern coast of South Africa. They have a population of 26 million. They are the largest producer of vanilla in the world, second to saffron. And they have at least 40,000 farmers working on the vanilla farms in Madagascar. And the irony of it all is that the prices of vanilla are actually determined in Paris and Europe. The farming, the processing, the production, the export is highly regarded, and to such an extent that a lot of the farmers actually have or carry AK-47s to protect their crops. So for me, the issue of vanilla was a very interesting and important point that I needed to talk about. I know you have synthetic vanilla as well, but everybody wants the natural one. Everybody wants the organic one. Mm-hmm. And then of course, Madagascar, the people there are extremely poor. The typical living on under $1 a day also happens there as well. So I felt that even the cake stand on the left, the one with the indigo, the cake stand metanomically symbolizes colonial powers in the transatlantic space and the stacking of resources used to prop up and feed European industrial economies. In my work, I connect these devices and metaphors with the materiality of the products from some of the seaports and sites of extraction along the West African coast, commonly referred to as the Gulf of Guinea. The 4 key products are addressed in the work, each engaged through bespoke cake stands dedicated to, like you mentioned, Perrin gold, cotton, indigo, and vanilla. The stands are situated in a tableau of hanging photographic transparencies, each similarly dedicated to one of the 4 products and natural resources. These hanging transparencies feature layered photographs, collage, reworked imagery, and symbols derived from both my personal archive of images, assembled through research trips, like I mentioned, and sites, as well as images publicly available online.
I'd like to, before we move on to talking about your work that you're working on right now, I wanted to just ask a little bit more about your choice to print this collage on transparencies.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that?
One of the reasons I like to print on transparencies is because I like to give a sense of aged history, and you can actually get that effect when you look at the transparencies because they're printed in sepia. And remember, in the olden days, we used to use negatives. So I just like the idea of actually using those same negatives, but blowing them up much larger. And you know, it gives a sense of history. It gives a sense of time. So that was why I decided to use transparencies. And as you can see, depending on the lighting and the layering, it gives a very nice, effect. So that was why I decided to use transparencies.
You have most recently been in residence at Fisk University in Nashville to conduct research related to the work you'll be creating for the upcoming exhibition, African Modernism in America. This project, The Politics of Selection, investigates the material presence and absence of women in the story of African modernity, and expands out from your examination of one of the major archives of African modernism, the Harman Foundation papers at the Library of Congress and the National Archives in Washington, D.C., in addition to research that you undertook yourself in Nigeria at the artist Afi Ekong's Bronze Gallery in Calabar and at Fisk University this past month. While you were at Fisk, you actually created part of the work in the library of the university, which was a thrill to witness for me and all the students who were around, I think. And in this work, this is the first section of the collage, you have used the 20 Naira note as your backdrop. The Naira is Nigeria's currency. And on this note, the 20 Naira note, we have the pioneering modern ceramic artist from Nigeria, Ladi Kwali, represented. Why have you chosen this as your backdrop?
I think Ladi Kwali is a very important figure in Nigeria from a woman's perspective. Not a lot of people are aware of her profession and what she was able to achieve. And I felt that this work that I'm doing now is like bringing back and acknowledging women artists, because whenever we talk about Nigerian contemporary art, you hardly hear people talking about the women artists that have come before me in depth. So I felt that this would be a fantastic backdrop to use as a collage and to use her as a focal point. One of the important things I liked about Ladi Kwali was her dedication to her practice and the fact that she had actually worked in, she came to America and worked at the Fisk University and also Tennessee State University, right? That was in 1972. And here I am back in 2022, similarly doing the same thing. So she also had a national honor. She also had MBE. So I just feel that she needs to come back and be acknowledged and memorialized into the narrative of African modernism, because we're always focusing on the men and not enough focus has been done on women. So I felt that it would be lovely to have that as a backdrop. And also metaphorically, considering that it's a 20 Naira note and she goes through millions of people's hands every day, but nobody knows really who she is or what she's achieved. So that's why I felt I should actually use her as a backdrop to my collage.
Here on the screen, we have some of the coverage in the news from Nashville newspapers from Ladi Kwali's demonstration at Tennessee State University in 1972.
Yes.
And then she also impacted some Nashville artists, Viola Wood included, who was really, impacted by Kwali's visit.
Yes.
So really, the exhibition and your work is trying to surface, you know, these artistic lineages that
Yes.
most maybe haven't even heard of. Lottie Quali to Viola Wood.
Exactly.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's so important. How have you approached your research for this project in the various archives you've visited? You know, who are some of the other figures in addition to Lottie Quali that you focused on?
The other artists that I'd like to focus on are Etsu Clara Obodaga Ugu, Susan Ogunjami, Afi Ekong, and of course, because Viola Wood met Lottie Quali and she's also a ceramist, I've focused on her. Other artists I've come into contact with were Aaron Douglas, Ben Onwonwu, Ibrahim El Salahi, Skanda Bosun, and so on and so forth.
And
to mention a few.
As I understand it, your inclusion of some of the male artists in relation to the female artists is to talk about kind of the disparity of information, you know, of works that we have access to. Like, for example, when we went to the Harman Foundation archives at the Library of Congress, the fatness of Ben Onwonwu's file in relation to you know, Susanna Ogunjami
and also remember Grace Kwame too.
Exactly. You know, it's just night and day. So to really kind of visualize that, you know, disparity as well, I think is interesting.
Yes.
And in addition, I think you may be doing some research on some of the figures who tried to, you know, write the history of African modernism, including the director of the Harman Foundation, Mary Brady, who's featured on the screen here.
Yes.
And
also Evelyn S. Brown.
The assistant director.
The assistant director that did a lot of the administration and interaction between artists from Africa and her in America. Exactly. That transatlantic relationship, she worked very much on that.
And maybe you could share a little bit about Afi Ekong and how she plays a role in your work.
Afi Ekong, she has a very interesting history. She studied fashion, art history, and painting. I think if you remember in our notes, we discovered that she opened the first gallery in Lagos called La Pac. She also opened her own gallery in Calabar called the Bronze Gallery, which is run by Burns Effiong, who is doing a wonderful job in Calabar. He moves between Lagos and Calabar. She was also part of the Red Cross. Of course, she was also a contemporary of Damas Woko, Uche Okeke, Bruce Abakpapaya.
I mean, so many.
So many of them, you know, so many of them. And we all the women that I've come into contact with, we know a little, but I don't think we know enough. Where are the major monographs that have been written on any of these female modernists? So I just feel that it's important that as much as I can, I bring them back into the conversation, do a little bit more in-depth research. What's the word I would use? Also, uncover and share new knowledge to the public on some of these women. So that's
absolutely.
That's kind of like what I feel my objective is. In my own artistic research, I seek to uncover narratives and connections that have not been explored in depth or have been deliberately ignored, suppressed, or covered up. The politics of selection is a collaboration between curator Perrin Lathrop and myself. It visualizes, through photography and other documents, the complex history of women in the arts and names those who must be more widely known.
Absolutely. We don't have too much time left, but I would like maybe to, as I share some of these images of you actually making your collage at Fisk, for you to maybe reflect a little on collage as a medium, as a process, and the act of cutting and repairing, you know, these disparate stories and individuals.
Yeah.
You know, you've used it in other
bodies of
parts
work.
of your work. Yeah.
I think maybe that's beginning to be kind of like is it a format or a way I love to work? The act of actually cutting, pasting, inserting, to me in a funny kind of way, helps me to acknowledge and reinvent or add to these stories or these histories. So even the care and repair aspect, you know, caring about women, caring about their professions, caring about the status, caring about the roles they played in the history of modernism in Nigeria and Africa as a whole, needs to be spoken about, I think, you know, as a woman artist. And that layering, to me, so I love doing it. It's such a, I know it's physical, but at the same time, there's something that goes on when I'm actually juxtaposing and layering different aspects of these women's professions onto a large format. And I find that very, very soothing and very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and even, well, watching you work, it's like magic almost, the way you use all these different elements to create a composition that makes sense. And then to be able to then see the way, you know, certain motifs then emerge even in the ultimate work. You know, hands are so prominent again, like within this this collage. Yeah. So really
because I mean it's there, I mean, as well as the mind and the soul, but it's also the hands that bring about the physical creation of the work. And of course, in some of them I have various texts where I think important things have been said and they need to be reread and reincorporated into our psyche at some point. But it's been a very, very fulfilling experience.
And maybe you can just share a few thoughts about, you know, the work that you'll continue when you go back to Lagos on this piece, and then maybe how you envision it appearing in the exhibition in the fall.
Yes, well, when I go back to Lagos, I'm going to continue. Remember, it's quite a large work. It's about 4 meters, right?
Don't ask me the
Don't
numbers
worry,
right now.
It's a very large work anyway, right, Jamal? It's quite a large work. So you have a real long panoramic. It's kind of like a walk through history, similar to what I've done before. But this time, it's going to be different in terms of its content. During my time at FIS, Guy and Jamal and Perrin and Rukisha, we went to the gallery, and it's going to have a kind of like a semicircle kind of panoramic view. We're going to have pedestals and actual physical objects that relate to the stories inside the transparency. I'm going to use transparencies again. I may incorporate a little bit of color, but I know that when I get back to Lagos, I'm going to have a very interesting time, especially with all the materials we've gathered from FISC, from the Harman Foundation, from the Library of Congress. I have a wealth of materials to really extend and give my own interpretation of that brief history, because, you know, history never ends, really. History is an ongoing thing. I mean, history is also past and present. And I think for me, history is important for me. I study it and I produce it. No historical narrative is complete. Even this is not complete, but hopefully through my work, I give a more nuanced and inclusive view. And so there's still much work to be done.
I think that's a great sentiment to end on. Maybe we can take a few questions in the last remaining 4 minutes, unless Jamal, you have some thoughts to share.
The one I want to go back, because we were talking about the scale of the installation. So I think that we settled at about 16 feet would be the scale.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is going to be absolutely incredible and such an immersive experience, an embodiment of who and where we've been, who we're becoming, and who we aspire to be. You know, I think it's just such a wonderful and beautiful project that you've been working on. And it's been such a joy to see it come into fruition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Joy for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if there's any easy Q. Okay, I think we're probably good.
Yeah.
Did any questions jump out? Sorry, it is a little hard to toggle between it all. Thank you, Keisha.
So there's
how much everyone appreciates the history, that they didn't know before, or they're being reminded of, and I just wanted to say thank you all for sharing your work, and Ndidi for bringing your energy to this space and adding to that history. So I really appreciated it, watching you all and work together, and also bring these narratives to light. So I want to honor your space in this history too. So thank you. And thank
you very much, Letitia. Thank you.
I love that we have those pictures of you at the tables in Fisk's library, like it's just so important to have documented you occupying that space, I think.
So we are near the end. Again, I want to echo the gratitude and thanks for the conversation today, and such a pleasure to have you. It was such a pleasure to have you both at Fisk, to be on the ground and working. And I know that our students are super excited as I see the excitement happening in the chat. And so I want to express our deepest gratitude for you and your contributions. The other thing that I want to say is to the ones that have joined the conversation today, as always, is thank you. And also to come visit the gallery. We have two fantastic exhibitions on view. One is Orders of Influence, American Modernism, that features the Alfred Stieglitz collection on the upper level. And on the lower level, we have In Truth and Light, a exhibition with students from Fisk University, TSU, and University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And that show will close and then travel to Knoxville. We have a reception on February 10th. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamal. Thank you for having me. Thank you for a wonderful experience during my residency. And Keisha and Perrin too. Thank you very much. And to all the other organizations that contributed to such an amazing experience. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much to you, and to you, Jamal, and you, Lakeisha, for hosting us in Nashville. It was really special to be there for some time, and we can't wait to come back.
We'll see you all in the fall. So have a good night.
You too. Thank you.